My Govanen. Welcome to the Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and a little while ago I got an email from a subscriber who sent me what somebody that he knows thought was a potential plot hole in the Lord of the Rings, and it centers on the fact that the minstrel who sings the tale of Frodo of the Nine Fingers at the Field of Cormallen does so mere hours after both Frodo and Sam were awake. And the idea here is that how could he have known enough to actually sing the full story in front of a bunch of, people without really having gotten the full tale? So the question put to me by my subscriber, I'm not going to name you the subscriber or the person who put the question to him because I don't really know if they even know my channel and would have, want to necessarily be named. But the question put to me then is this a real plot hole? And this isn't something complicated enough to merit a full-scale video, so it's here on my Thursday thoughts. And to me, this doesn't seem like as much of a problem as I think the person thinks it is. And I think part of the issue here is when we're reading the story, it certainly takes us a lot longer to read through the chapters dealing with Frodo and Sam. It just takes a while because there's so much description of things going on. But we have to remember what this minstrel is going to be singing is probably just the bare bones of the tale embellished for poetic purpose. It's not going to be like reading The Lord of the Rings where you get all this description. Now, bearing in mind, the question specifically points out that what they would know potentially without knowing anything from Frodo and Sam is everything up to when Frodo and Sam left Hineth Annwn and Faramir's company, because from that point on, they don't see anybody but Gollum, really, until they're rescued. So up to that point, they would at least have some of the basics of the story potentially from Faramir, some of it from Gandalf, some of it from, the rest of the company, all that kind of stuff. So the story from Hineth Annwn, what really is encompassed there? So they leave Hineth Annwn, they do some traveling, they come to the crossroads, they find, the statue with the orc head replacing the original head. They continue, they get to Minas Morgul, they see the Witch King and his army leave, they climb up to the pass of Cirith Ungol, they end up in the pass. Frodo gets stabbed by a giant spider. Frodo gets taken by orcs after Sam takes the ring. Sam decides, wait, I'm going to rescue him after all. He goes in, finds that almost all the orcs are dead, rescues Frodo. They then leave, of course, being basically chased by Nazgul after the Watchers do their thing, and the whole, who knows exactly how that all works, but the Watchers, alert the nearby Nazgul to the danger of, intruders, I guess. Frodo and Sam then leave with some level of pursuit, seemingly, and then they have to find their way across, and they end up going north, getting stuck with a band of orcs. They move with that band of orcs pretty close to the gates of Udun, and then they manage to separate from them, make their way east, and finally across the plain of Gorgoroth, and finally to Mount Doom. They climb Mount Doom, encounter Gollum again. Frodo has his, words for Gollum about casting him into the fire and all that. Sam deals with Gollum while Frodo goes up, and then Sam follows Frodo, and then all of the stuff in Mount Doom happens. I mean, I just basically told the story in under 5 minutes, and that's not even giving a lot of, I could have given a lot more detail. So, would it really have taken anybody very long to tell this story? Now, what we know from the text is when Sam wakes up, he first talks to Gandalf, and he sees Frodo lying next to him, also asleep. Shortly thereafter, Frodo wakes up and says, I've been waiting for you, you sleepyhead. He said, I was awake early this morning, but now it must be nearly noon. Now, this is in April, by the Shire reckoning, admittedly, but still in April. Even by our calendar, it would have been probably early April, which means the sun has got to be coming up by 7 a.m. And if it's now nearly noon, that makes it theoretically at least 11 a.m. So 4 hours. If Frodo woke and then ended up staying awake for about 2 hours waiting for Sam and then fell back to sleep for another 2 hours, that would give him 2 hours to give Gandalf a much, more detailed version of the story, and then Gandalf to relay that much more detailed story to the minstrel or whoever to then relay to the minstrel while both Sam and Frodo are still asleep. So that's one simple solution to the whole problem, but there's other potential solutions as well. For one, when Frodo wakes in Rivendell, Gandalf knows already a lot of what's going on, and Frodo asks, "How do you know all this?" And he says, "You've talked a lot in your sleep, Frodo." Well, potentially that's happened here too, because this is actually like 14 days after the ring is destroyed. Both of them have been sleeping for a long time. The odds of them not, sleep talking and telling a lot of their story is actually pretty low, I think, given that we already know Frodo has a tendency to do this sort of thing. So it wouldn't shock me at all if Gandalf already had the full story before Frodo ever even woke up. The other potential solution here, and this is the one I think probably the least likely, but Gandalf at one point, as Gandalf the White, mind you, specifically, but that's relevant because he is still Gandalf the White, he will tell somebody in, I think it's in the Houses of Healing, "Also, it is given to me to see many things afar off." And he's referring to seeing things that he was not present for. He wasn't physically there to see what happened. I think he may have been referring to the encounter of Theoden and Eowyn and the Witch King, but I can't remember for sure. And the details are not important. I just know that he said it, and he was talking about something he wasn't physically present to see. It is possible that some similar vision was given to him of, a lot of the story of what happened to Frodo and Sam, such that he didn't need a whole lot of details filled in. So there are at least 3 ways in which the full story could have been communicated to this minstrel before he ever sang his song in front of the crowd at the Field of Cormallen. And that's to say nothing of the fact that the song that he sings may not have even touched that much on the story of Frodo past the point where he leaves Faramir in any significant detail. We don't know exactly what details he puts in this song, and presumably he's not singing of the entire story from Rivendell all the way to Mount Doom, because that would take a long time. I mean, maybe he does, but if you're going to do a poetic rendition of this, it's probably going to be a while, and it's, I imagine Frodo and Sam are probably not going to want to sit there through all that after they just woke up for the first time and probably are hungry and who knows what else. But even if it was a long one, still, in the scheme of things, what happens to Frodo and Sam after leaving Faramir is relatively small. It's a small amount of stuff. The most involved and exciting stuff would be, the encounter with Shelob and maybe the orcs, plus, seeing the Witch King leave Minas Morgul. And, of course, the final confrontation on Mount Doom, which, obviously, that's a thing you want to put in there because that's really the capstone of the whole story. But that's only a few key events, and it doesn't take a lot of stuff to fill in, a little bit of poetic embellishment to make, and by embellishment, I'm not saying the guy would have made up details. I'm saying, to round out all the stuff to make it metered poetry, right? It wouldn't have taken all that much to make that work, because presumably by the time that Frodo and Sam are rescued and then everybody's fine, a minstrel had 13 days to work up the entire story in poetic form, except for this last little chunk, and then he could already have some idea how he was going to do that, and then finally fill it in. So I don't think this is really a serious issue at all. Nothing like a real plot hole. I think it just kind of seems like that maybe to us because when we read the story, like when you read book 6 from when, Frodo and Sam are in Cirith Ungol on, not even counting the stuff that came between Faramir and Minas Morgul, it seems like a lot, because when you read it, it takes more than a couple of hours, probably, unless you're a really fast reader. But that's only because there's a lot of detail in the written chapters that Tolkien gives us. That doesn't necessarily have to carry over into what this minstrel is going to sing. So at the end of the day, no. I don't think this is a plot hole. I think it's relatively easy to solve. Like I said, there's at least 3 potential ways. I don't know that Gandalf would be able to get a vision of all the stuff that happened, especially with Frodo in Mordor. I think probably he would definitely not be able to see most of that unless he was granted an after the fact vision, by Eru himself or something. But the other 2 explanations I think are both perfectly plausible, and a good minstrel, even with only 2 hours, could probably put that together and add it to the rest of what he had already composed and be ready to go. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that potential plot hole. Hope that was interesting enough to you. And, until the next Thursday Thoughts, I'm the Tolkien Geek, signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namarie. Thanks to all my channel supporters, especially Elf Friends PA Brew News, Nathan Dufour, and Paul Leone.